Hello, world.
Nice.
Welcome to episode one of the podcast. Today we're talking about JavaScript. I think uh, I think all of us have had run-ins with JavaScript. The two of you, I think, work quite extensively with it. I not so much, but I still have dealt with it a fair share. And just to set some precedent, JavaScript has been like one of the most popular languages. Like leave Python aside, I think JavaScript has been one of the fastest growing languages. Adoption is like through the roof, and it's like a love hate game that we play with this language where we love trashing JavaScript, but at the end of the day, it's our bread and butter, and it's going to be, I think, for a long time. And so today we'll probably talk a little bit about the history of JavaScript and where we are today. Right.
People have been talking shit about JavaScript and yet it won't just go.
It won't. It definitely won't. And it's just one of
Yeah.
those things. It's just one of those things. We blow off steam, but uh, but yeah, it's going to be integral for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
And
But the good thing about JavaScript is that over the years they've still kind of addressed the things that people hate and they've kind of tried to
Improved
move
it,
away
right?
from it
they
as
have,
well.
they have, they have.
Yeah.
So
And
I
I think
think that
that's
they're yeah.
and I think that's a huge credit to the standardization effort that with ECMA and all of those things that they've kind of been able to iteratively get these updates into the language and still be pretty compatible in general. So it started. I think JavaScript was conceptualized by Brendan Eich, I think, at Netscape, probably right in what the 90s, which
Yeah, the
is
90s.
Yeah.
yeah, like almost 15 years
So
ago. No, wait, 25 years ago. My
15,
mathematics
95.
is subpar.
yes,
A
you're
little
still
bit weak.
stuck in the zeros.
Yeah, a little bit
Yeah,
weak.
but I think Brendan Eich was basically hired to integrate Scheme into Netscape, and then they
Yeah,
Right.
they
decided
wanted a scripting language for the browser.
along
And
with Java. So they also had plans for applets and stuff.
They
And
did.
yeah,
then Brendan
maybe
Eich, yeah,
I
Did
think they
applets
did
exist before?
they did
I'm not
95.
I'm.
Okay,
I
wait.
think they. I think
Mm.
it did. I think it did, or maybe it was building towards it because Sun was also, I think, working on it. And I guess they wanted some scripting for people because so far people used to only write markup, and I don't even know if CSS existed at that point. But
No, no,
they
no.
basically just wrote markup, and there was no interaction. So even something as simple as validation had to go to the server and then
So
reload the entire page again. So they were like people who are not programmers per se can just have just have a small language that they can use to just gives the web page a bit of functionality.
right.
So Brendan
That's
Eich
why
was
it's
asked to do
so
this in 10
famous.
days. 10
Man,
days. Guys, what are the most you have achieved in 10 days? This is like an ultimate flex.
I've
You
begun to
have
start a project in 10 days.
Yeah.
I don't know how these
Yeah,
get
yeah,
done.
yeah. Yeah. So
But
every
yeah,
time there is a shit feature in JavaScript, you just go back to 10 days.
yeah. I think
yeah.
you can cut some slack for that.
Is the is the Tony Stark built a robot in a cave analogy
Yeah.
for us? You can't
So
implement this feature. He
Sure, sure.
he invented JavaScript in 10 days.
so Brendan is our real life Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we don't want to kill him, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolute mad lad.
I mean, we've tried to kill the language, but the language lives on.
The
It
language
does.
has tried to kill us. Let's be fair.
Yeah. What doesn't kill you, it hasn't killed us yet, and what doesn't kill you, we all know the same.
Right.
I
Okay.
think at the time, and this is what I read somewhere was that at the time when they were working on JavaScript, they were under contract with Sun, and so they had a very specific brief to make it not too much like Java because of basically they were under pressure from marketing to kind of market this as a silly little brother, to quote Brendan Eich himself, as a silly little brother to Java. Uh, and so a lot of the design decisions that were taken actually go actually like have their roots in just pressure from the marketing department to not make it too similar to Java. So I think even the class system, not having a class system, if I'm not wrong, Brendan Eich attributed to just trying to make it not too much like Java.
Yeah. Also, it wouldn't
And
make sense to have another Java because they were looking for something that is way more forgiving, right? And
yeah, more scriptable.
I think is Brendan Eich had mentioned once that one of his greatest regrets in JavaScript is some tester gave him a feedback that I want to be able to compare two as an integer and two in a string, and it's not letting me do that. And so he integrated that. But we all know how that goes.
Yeah.
Transitivity is broken, and how
Yeah, that's
he
true.
Transitivity
marketed
is
it
broken
as
for the
yeah,
double
that's it.
equals operator. It's broken only for the double equals operator, an operator that is almost not being used anywhere in
Anymore.
production
Yeah,
code.
yeah. But back
Yeah,
then, I think it was I think when they tried to standardize it, the triple equals was
Introduced.
proposed and then integrated in the language. Yeah,
right.
yeah. It was marketed as I think they started off with Mocha, but when it was released as LiveScript, and then finally I don't remember the exact sequence of events, but there was this whole browser was. So Microsoft basically reverse engineered JavaScript and made their own language called JScript.
Yep.
And Microsoft, being Microsoft, decided let's not play well with the existing
Ecosystem, yeah,
yeah, exactly, ecosystem. And
and make something of our own to confuse
yeah,
everyone. The
Right.
feed
yeah,
of the
browser
confusion
was
of the
And I think Microsoft was pretty
community.
obstinate too, right, during this process. I think I also read that they didn't really participate in standardization at all, and they kind of
right.
and essentially I think this all stems from the fact that at the time Microsoft did establish a monopoly in the browser space, and we all know what that kind of
Sure.
leads to, complacency, and you think people are going to use it no matter what. But then I think
Yeah. To
Mozilla, I
think
think
that
Netscape became
yeah,
good.
I think to think that Internet Explorer has become a meme now. Back then it was the shit, man.
It was the shit.
It has now become equivalent of the
It was
Pokemon
the
Switch
shit,
of
it's
Slowpoke.
shit now.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
dropped the
pretty
low.
much.
What was that Pokemon analogy? I would like to hear that.
Slowpoke, Slowpoke.
Slowpoke, oh
Yeah.
yeah.
I think
Yeah, I
Slowpoke
remember
came
that.
before
Interchangeable memes
Pokemon.
at this point. Fair. It did.
Yeah, but we're millennials. For us, Pokemon is everything.
Yeah. No, I meant the Slowpoke meme is used like Internet Explorer.
Yeah, yeah. I remember
Ah,
that
right.
phrase.
So yeah, then I guess what happened was Microsoft had its own stuff going on, and LiveScript or JavaScript was then I think taken for standardization, but Microsoft, as you mentioned, was quite aloof. So finally, I guess people were just. Can you imagine having to code for different browsers? I think none of us have done it much. Have you ever had to support an IE6, IE7 or something?
No, never.
Thankfully, no. Because I usually build admin UI, right, which
Yeah,
our business team uses. So it's not user facing. So and mostly people in our company use the latest version of Chrome or Firefox. So we never had
right.
to. I never had to bother about IE,
Right.
and thank God. It touched wood.
Yeah, can you imagine having to write a code for every device? Well, not
Yep.
every device, but every browser. It just sounds crazy. We take stuff like cross-browser compatibility for granted, but
Imagine
it
how
must have been a pain
jQuery
in
did
the
it.
ass back then.
Imagine how jQuery might have done it.
Yeah.
Yep.
jQuery was like the new kid on the block, but it supported. It added so many features to JavaScript. It utilized the language pretty well, and even now it's yeah, I mean, definitely it's not as maintainable because that's just how it is, but still writing code and just making a product in it is
Yep.
really quick. It's insane.
Yeah,
Good for
definitely.
prototyping. Yeah.
jQuery, right? You're talking about jQuery?
jQuery. Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
jQuery.
Because that's one of the first run-ins I had with JavaScript. Because in college I was trying to write a web application, and jQuery was a library of choice, easy to get familiar with and start writing code right away. And yeah, I found it really easy to work with. Again, the maintainability side that Rohan spoke about, I hear that a lot, the complaints about maintainability. But again, with small apps like mine, I never felt it. But what exactly makes jQuery so much of a chimera, as people say, it is?
Well, the idea here being that I can have well, it's not just jQuery. In general, JavaScript, if you write code that way, where you can
in an
just
imperative way.
select, yeah, in an imperative way, you can just select a random element. You can just manipulate it however you want, and there is no way to trace where that manipulation happened. If you look at something like, say, a React or a Vue, you can figure out pretty fast which component or which file you need to look at to see the change that happened or to locate a bug. In jQuery, it might be that much harder.
Yeah. For example, I was making an admin interface in jQuery. The developer before me had made these functions that generated Java HTML strings and then use jQuery.inner HTML to insert these. So why was this used? It was because our form was pretty dynamic. So if in one step of the form you clicked a check mark, then 2-3 steps ahead you had to generate new form subsections, and those subsections had to be validated, and somehow there were a lot of mutations. So if you made a change in some section of the form, you never know what all other sections of the form are affected by. So there were a lot of bugs whenever you went to implement new features. That's
Right,
just how mutation is, right? You think that mutation is easy to make your changes quicker, but in the long run you can't keep track of the your changes to implement newer features. That was a big downside of jQuery, I feel.
Right. So it's a
yeah.
leniency
But
of the
I
framework,
mean,
is it?
I think
And
not really. You can
mm,
for I think it's just the convention that has changed over time, where you can still make a React-like app in jQuery where you have a say a global state, and you just use jQuery to manipulate that particular state.
yeah,
So you could do that, but it's just that the way it was written initially, I guess that's just how the convention was back then. It made legacy apps quite difficult to work with. Of course, there are
yeah.
people who will disagree because they've been doing jQuery all their life. We can look at it
Those
through
are
the
the
lens
people
of working
who,
in a modern framework. So
yeah,
we will
those are the
obviously,
people,
yeah,
those are the people who actually know how to use it properly, like you said, right?
yes,
Without with the least mutations, you use immutability so that your data structures, uh, what do you say, you can easily maintain state. Immutability helps you maintain your state easier rather than just setting random keys in your objects.
yeah. But I mean, credit where credit is due. When jQuery did enter the market, it must have been crazy because it was browser was were pretty much at the peak, and it gave a simple API that would work on every browser. So that was quite amazing. And it also, if I'm not mistaken, the CSS selector stuff that we use like pretty much all the time now, I think it started with jQuery, the document.query
Yeah,
selector
query
all that we
selector.
use now.
Yeah,
That pretty much started with jQuery, and that was actually much better than the old way to do it, I guess.
I wonder who
I
came up
think
with jQuery.
Chrome.
Let's look it up.
I was just going to do the
Dude,
same.
The unsung
jQuery
hero.
jQuery was so popular that Chrome has like what do you say, aliased the dollar symbol with document.query selector. So instead of
Yeah,
calling
yeah.
document.query selector, you can just call a dollar function to select
Yep.
a DOM node. That's crazy
I
how
actually
simple
wonder
it
how
is.
much of the current web code that is in production uses jQuery because I wouldn't be surprised if it's a lot. Even right now, if I have to make a one-off form that is used locally or something like that, I would always go for jQuery just because you can get things done very fast. The less you need
Yep.
to revisit a page, the better jQuery looks. Did you find it, Banai?
Yeah, I did. Let me just read the history section of the Wikipedia entry. jQuery was originally created in January '06 at Barcamp, NYC by John Resig, influenced by Dean Edwards' earlier CSS query library. I think CSS influenced jQuery, CSS query library. I don't know what that is, but that seems like the query selector thingy that you were talking about.
Yeah, it might be.
And it's currently still maintained actively, I think. It's currently maintained by a team of developers led by Timmy Willison. And yeah, it's licensed under the MIT license and things like that. But so it's
You know, another reason why
just a quick fact
jQuery,
here. As of
yeah,
Feb 2020, jQuery is used by 74.4% of the top 10 million websites. So that is like stellar adoption numbers
Damn,
still.
damn. Yeah,
legacy code.
Yeah. So I guess inertia
yeah.
is
It's like I hear PHP being a dying language, PHP being a dying language, but it's what most of the web is still running on. Of course, that is slowly changing, but yeah, such changes
That's
are slow.
that's entirely because of Drupal
WordPress.
and WordPress.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, sure, sure.
But again, the fact that WordPress and Drupal might have been written in PHP was because it's so simple and an easy scripting language to just, build something out of.
Yeah,
We again,
Rohan,
PHP again, we'll have maybe an episode on it, but we one other language that we love trashing along with JavaScript, but one we can't live without.
yeah.
Rohan, do you remember how many jQuery plugins you used in your UI? There was a plugin for
No.
tooltips. There was a plugin for
Yeah,
those
there's
drop
a
downs. There's
yes.
data tables. Remember data table?
Yeah,
Data
yeah.
tables.
Bootstrap. The whole Bootstrap framework was entirely run on jQuery. The every interaction that any of the Bootstrap component had, like drop downs and all, that
Yeah.
also used. Maybe it still uses jQuery. I'm not quite sure. Bootstrap 4.
Oh yeah,
I actually
Vinay,
didn't
you
Bootstrap
know
wanted
had a
to
this.
say
newer
something?
version.
No, I actually didn't know this that it internally used jQuery. I was going to say that I have used the drag and drop plugin. I think I had to, at some point I had to build a drag and drop interface, and I struggled for a long time trying to do it with HTML files drag and drop. And then I just said
Right,
let's
right,
go the
right.
easy way and use jQuery. It was a breeze.
Yeah,
So Bootstrap had these components like carousels and modals and all that use jQuery in the background. Otherwise, the plain CSS stuff is just CSS or
yeah,
Sass
yeah.
or
Of
something.
course.
Yeah,
Yes. Anything that requires interaction used jQuery.
jQuery. Yep.
Yeah.
Bootstrap was also a huge boost for jQuery usage. Yeah.
Didn't Bootstrap come much later? jQuery is already pretty well established. Then isn't that the
Yeah,
case?
but because
But I
Bootstrap
guess
was so popular, jQuery was also boosted along with
yeah,
it,
yeah.
I guess.
I think Bootstrap and jQuery really made web development much easier than it would have been without it.
Yeah. Just when people thought web dev is a hopeless cause, someone would come up with a great framework that makes web dev easier. Take
Yeah, yeah,
Webpack for example, Babel. Babel was another thing that really helped you migrate your code from ES5 to ES6. So even if
yeah,
the browser didn't support it, you could easily serve your ES6 code transpiled to ES5 with the help
yeah,
of Babel.
yeah. I don't I can't say this for a fact, but I think web development is a field where the ecosystem changes drastically in a matter of years. Like if you look at the way things work, maybe say 5 years ago, where you would probably have something like say an Angular JS and maybe a Gulp or a Grand pipeline, and now you
Yeah.
have stuff like React and Angular and Vue, and now you have Webpack, and who knows, man? In the next couple of years, Webpack might be replaced by something that is even better. And I have not seen any other thing change as fast. Almost. If you look at a project that is currently working, as opposed
Mm.
to like something that is legacy, which I mean like something that was written maybe 3 years ago or so, there is a crazy amount of difference. Just the way it's structured. Even when JavaScript introduced imports in ES 2015, they just completely changed the way things were working. You would use something like a require.js or what is it, ASM module, but
JS.
now it's completely different. CommonJS, sure,
Common JS
but
was
now
mostly I heard about Common JS through Node.js itself. I never used Common JS at a browser level JavaScript, only for Node.js.
right,
Yeah. It's
right,
good
right,
that you
right.
brought this up because I think all of
Yeah,
these things came as a result of Node.js, you know, coming to the scene. I think Node.js is
yeah, yeah, yeah.
essentially just JavaScript running in the exact same engine as the Chrome engine, but on the server side, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
And what it did was it basically moved JavaScript out of the browser because before that, people pretty much had the perception that JavaScript equals in the web browser. But
Right.
this made it that you can just write a random app in JavaScript as well, and it was quite a revolutionary thing, I suppose, because JavaScript is also a pretty low barrier entry sort of a language. So scripting in that is pretty straightforward once you get the hang of it.
Yeah.
yeah. So the
So Node
browser
was
So
yeah,
JavaScript
go
in
ahead.
the browser sandbox is just a JavaScript runtime surrounded by your browser calls for fetching data, your fetch methods and all. Your browser runtime creates threads and manages the event loop for your JavaScript runtime. So all Node.js did was instead of your browser runtime, it brought in a C++ based runtime that could directly talk with your system and expose system level calls to your JavaScript runtime. So that was pretty fun. After that, the guy who made Node.js, I can't remember his name. He went on to make Deno. Have you guys heard of Deno?
No. What is it?
Yeah, isn't
Deno,
it TypeScript over Go instead of C++?
a TypeScript over Rust instead of C++. So,
Oh, it's over Rust. Okay,
the
because I remember
over
a
Rust.
talk that he had. I think he said it was a talk titled 10 Mistakes I Made in Node.js or something,
Yeah, yes, that's right.
where he talked about
So
his
he
up,
fixed
up and
everything.
coming framework.
Yeah. So he fixed everything that he found wrong with Node.js. I think the first thing was that he wanted to make the Node.js API as close as to the browser API. So he really wanted to get rid of the window and process difference between the two. So I don't know if he's named it to window again in Deno, and then he's also improved sandboxing in Deno. So if you start a Deno app and there's a fetch API call, or you use Axios like library to fetch data, it won't
Hmm.
allow you because by default your code Deno doesn't give you a code to access the net. So while running the JavaScript code, you need to pass in a flag like you need to allow networking, you need to allow file system access, so you can grant more granular permissions to your JavaScript code to run on your machine. So it's more secure, I feel, because of that. And and the biggest difference was npm, dude. Npm, you guys know, right, how npm works. It fetches libraries from around the internet that people upload onto the registry, and for your personal project you could add those dependencies and link them. So
Yeah,
this was a pretty centralized concept, right? Because you need to fetch everything from the registry, and everything was stored on the registry. So
yeah.
I'm sorry for not remembering the guy's name. So what the Deno guy did
Dal.
was,
It was something Dal. Let me look it up.
okay, so the Deno guy, what he did was, uh, your import statements. So import statements work in Deno. You don't have to use CommonJS to require modules. You can use import statements, and import statements can have their arguments as a local file path, or you could just directly enter a URL. So
Yeah,
import a JavaScript URL, and it would import that JavaScript file into your current running code rather
yeah,
than
yeah.
having a central node module.
I think he used Go as inspiration for a lot of these design choices because I remember in his talk he was constantly when he mentioned each of the 10 things that he wished he had done better in Node. he was constantly apologizing. Like, I'm sorry, I put this feature. It was quite funny.
Even
This talk
Rust
is worth
has,
a watch.
yeah,
His name is Ryan Dahl, by the way.
Ryan Dahl. Okay, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
really great talk.
But these URL dependencies that you mentioned, when you directly
Yeah.
put the URL into the import statement, is it going to import your sources at runtime, or is it going to like put it in a node modules folder the way an npm install would do,
Oh,
or some kind of
so what
folder
happens?
on disk?
So what happens when you? It's some kind of folder. Deno maintains a cache in your home directory or whatever directory you want to set it up as. And whenever you run a Deno executable on a JS file, it and a JS file imports some library. It looks up its cache and directly uses the file from the cache, or else it downloads it into its cache. It's a
So I think
cache-based
this
system.
got it. So I think this would borrow a little bit from Maven and all these things. That's how Maven does it too, right? They have a cache,
Yeah,
not M2
yeah,
and
yeah.
all that.
It does, it does. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think this would help you with multiple apps on your system using the same dependency. Would now that object would now be fetched from
Correct.
one cache object, and as opposed to having multiple copies of the same thing in the
Yeah.
node modules folder of each. Uh,
No more node modules being bulky memes.
yes, yes.
Well,
Maybe
JS still
Randall,
exists, so who
maybe
knows?
Randall was really frustrated by those jokes, and he made this feature intentionally.
Right.
Quite possible. Quite possible.
We're all human.
Yeah, but we can't talk about JavaScript without talking about Douglas Crawford, though, because that
Yeah,
guy, as he's contributed a lot to JavaScript. He's made the JSON format. He himself says that I didn't invent the JSON format. I merely discovered it. It was already there in the wild. I just
yeah.
went out, found it, standardized it, and made a website for it. It's pretty funny. He
Even
also has
Brandon
a
Ike,
talk. Let me.
hmm, even
Yeah, go ahead.
Brandon
Go ahead.
Ike mentions him as a really close co-worker during the development of JavaScript. So yeah, they are the ones responsible for improving JavaScript, or else it would have been another trash language that stayed back in the sands of time,
Right.
like COBOL.
Yeah. So there's this talk by Douglas Crawford called the Jason Saga, where he basically explains how he came up with JSON, how he standardized it. It's a pretty good talk. It's definitely worth listening to.
We'll link it. I think we'll link it in the description or something.
Yeah, we should because it's quite funny and also definitely informative. One of the things he said was that he wanted JSON, the standard for JSON, to fit in the back of a card. So he basically has a visiting card with JSON written in the front, and the back has the entire standard for it, which is quite
This
hilarious.
is hilarious.
Also,
That's really
the license for JSON is basically the MI license, but he mentions that it was the time of 9/11 and the president and vice president were talking about all evil and stuff. So
Mhm.
this library, the license for that was this must be used for good and not evil. Apparently, he gets mail saying, "But I want to use this for evil."
good.
How could you use the license for evil though?
No, the product
Oh, Jason
JSON.
for evil. Oh,
Use it for good, not
what
evil.
would he?
You could
Okay.
write the configs for a nuke in JSON. I think that would be using it for you. I think
Oh,
It
JSON
was
has left the
clearly
bounds of Earth. I think it found use in a lot more places than just JavaScript or the one
Oh,
thing.
for sure. It pretty much replaced XML as being the standard for just
data
exchanging
transfer.
information between applications. And
Yeah.
it had support in nearly every, it still has support in nearly every language. It's still the language of choice for most REST
Definitely.
APIs. Well, not language, I mean the format. And
Yeah.
it's pretty simple because it has very few building blocks. And you just use those basic building blocks to create whatever you want. Except as he mentions, you can't have a circular data structure in it. But most of us don't really need something like that. So it's
There's
it's
a
pretty awesome.
data structure called JSON D, I think, or JSON L. I'm not sure for referencing JSON data. So even if you have a circular dependency, you just have a reference to the dependency. I think this database called Terminus DB, a graph database, it uses JSON D for communicating with the server, the actual DB server. Uh, so since it's a graph database, you need a lot of circular dependent data, right? So it uses
Right.
a modified JSON to uh, communicate the graph data. So
Interesting.
there, people have made it possible to uh, use circular data in JSON. Yeah,
Right.
blows my
That's
mind.
awesome.
And I think the fact that it's so human readable is one of the reasons why it's so successful, and it's used in REST APIs and what have you, because it's simple to
Yeah,
Yeah,
look at and just understand.
but one thing
it's also
that
much less
JSON,
verbose than XML somehow.
yeah,
Yes.
but that's the drawback also of JSON. You can't have a you can't define a schema in the JSON object that you're passing, right? So
Yeah.
for large enterprise projects, XML was better because you have a fixed defined schema and you know that your XML would follow that same schema. However, even JavaScript, JSON people have circumvented this by using JSON schema. Yeah, if you go to jasonschema.org, they've specified what do you say spec for defining schema for JSON documents in JSON itself. So you have a JSON data that you use normally, and you have JSON schema for defining the schema of the JSON documents that you're passing around. So it makes validation pretty easier.
I
So
think that's
whatever
Yeah.
problems
something.
JSON has, people
I
have
think. Sorry.
fixed it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Go
What I
ahead.
was
Yeah.
saying was that I think a lot of the serialization and deserialization libraries that you have, your Jacksons and your JSONs or whatever, I think they also do this handling to a large extent. Conforming to a schema, ignoring properties that uh, are not acceptable by the schema that you define. And so yeah, it's been a
Right.
multi-pronged effort, I guess.
As
Yeah,
far
and
as async,
genuinely, for most of things that we've developed, I don't think we've ever felt the need for stricter validation in terms of data. At least we've made do with JSON pretty well.
so
Right.
because we've been using APIs. I mean, we haven't used JSON schema, but we've been using TypeScript to validate our JSON APIs. So same as
Oh, sure.
Jackson, same as the way in which you specify validation in Jackson, you could do
Makes
the
sense.
same with TypeScript by defining
I think
interfaces
you
and
could do.
classes.
You
Yeah,
would need to do that. Like it would be a given for any statically typed language, right? Because
statically
there's
typed.
no way
Yes.
you could deserialize or serialize something without knowing
Yes.
exactly what it is. But
That's right.
even for languages like say JavaScript, for instance, it's
Hmm.
completely. I think it's completely okay to have to expect certain keys and then write the validation code in the client
Yeah.
side rather than expecting the data itself to uh, contain the validation.
Yeah, libraries like Joey and Yup, they do this very well. You can declaratively define the schema of your data in JavaScript itself. You can chain, like if you want a object to have a key called name, and its value should be a string. So you can write yup.string dot max 10 characters dot min 5 characters dot unique if you want some not
Mhm.
unique, lowercase, dot lowercase. Everything should be lowercase. So you can go on chaining your validations to that. It's a pretty intuitive and declarative way to define and validate your JSON schema in JavaScript
I
without any
think
types. Yeah.
we've talked about so many.
Also,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was saying we've talked about so many JavaScript libraries, and it just shows how vibrant and massive this ecosystem is. Everyone's built a tool to do everything that you can imagine that you would have to do, and it's just like it's exciting where we might just find ourselves in a year or
Yeah, yeah.
2 years completely different direction.
There is a reason this node module is so heavy. Joke is there because there's
Prevalent.
just
Yeah.
people. In fact, I'd seen an article someone had written where there was some library that was only used to left pad a string. So this was this had been imported in multiple places in many other libraries, and there was a bug in it, and so a lot of shit broke, man. It's
Yeah, a lot of shit
it's fine,
breaks.
guys. You don't have to go that
Have you heard?
granular. You just write your own left pad function.
Have you heard about the
There's a
is
case to be
even?
made either way, though.
Have you heard about the is even library? It just exports
Yeah.
an is odd is even function.
Yes.
Oh man.
Yes.
It's hilarious.
Yep.
It's
There's
that funny.
also a lot of security issues, right, with npm.
Mhm.
Like once a publisher can publish his code to npm which works properly, and then if they, what happens if they push malicious code in their npm registry,
Yes,
then the same malicious
yes.
code would be
But
reported by
to be fair, that
security.
is the risk you have when you're working for when you're importing any
Public
third-party
register.
library, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah, and which
I
is why
think,
a lot of companies that use third-party libraries audit them and always host them in a private registry, a private clone of the registry. So any updates to the
Right, right.
source, upstream source, don't affect you immediately.
And that's also why most professionals are very reluctant to upgrade anything, because that might mean browsing through a lot of your dependencies and transitive dependencies, and ain't nobody got time for that.
right.
Yeah.
But there's a certain sense of security thinking that the libraries that we import are a part of open source, so we can just look at their GitHub accounts and have a look at the source code and see if the new patch has any malicious code in it or not. But let's be honest, I don't check them, but I don't know. There might be people who might be checking into every new upgrade patch, so I
Right,
can't say. I can't say.
right.
So I'm not
But
sure if yeah.
for
Sorry.
for open source libraries, I'm guessing that it must be it must be very easy for someone to find a bug, and there will be a
Exactly.
huge article or Twitter storm or
Yeah.
something
I think
overnight.
there's safety in numbers in the case of open source stuff, because there's just so many eyeballs on that thing at any given point of time that things would get found out, or there'd be a furore. And with
Makes
stuff that is
sense.
closed source, I think most of these guys are enterprise software. So I mean, they are liable in case they,
Yes.
their vulnerabilities or anything like
Tell that to Facebook.
that.
Man.
Yeah. But JavaScript in general as a language has also introduced us to new concepts, right? So I'm guessing you guys also majorly had Java in college, right? It was C and Java
Yeah.
for you guys as well, right?
Yep.
Right.
So the whole idea of inheritance that comes from a Java school of thought, and I mean, I know it's technically not Java school of thought; it was based on languages before it. But for us,
Yeah.
Java,
Yeah.
Java was
JavaScript
original.
completely sort of turns it over its head, right? Because here
Mhm.
we don't really have a class. We have a prototype chain, and objects inherit from other objects, and there's essentially no type as such. So
Yeah.
it took a while to wrap your head
Get
around
used
that,
to.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It did.
I mean, I still don't have a proper knowledge about it. I remember Vedant teaching us about it during a joining session,
Yeah.
Right.
and I had grasped it at that time. But I never used inheritance, OP inheritance in JavaScript. Have you guys used it? Have you,
Not really. No.
Sebastian?
No, actually, since I've majorly worked in, say, React, the only
Yeah.
thing I've used is extends React.component. And now,
Right.
since we use ES6, it has a very Java-like syntax, which
With
is
hooks, right?
completely different under the hood. But syntactic sugar makes it so that I can write a very Java-like inheritance code without really needing to understand what's going on in the hood. Actually, there are a lot of criticisms for this, where people are like, because you are introducing a Java-like syntax, it will ensure that developers don't really need to worry about how it's actually operating under the hood. Like it's a
Right.
internal call to
Prototype chain.
object.create or
Mhm.
whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So the abstraction is too effective, is what people are scared of.
Yeah, but I mean, where's the downside? I don't see one
Mhm.
personally. It's not
It
like this ecosystem is suddenly going to go away. It's not like you're going to go like roll back ES6.
Yeah.
At least I hope that doesn't happen. break a large chunk of the internet.
You heard about leaky abstractions.
No, what
Yeah,
are they?
yeah.
So leaky abstractions are basically, let's say for example, let's take this example only. With the class syntax, ES6 has abstracted over the prototype chain uh, thingamajig, right? So you don't need to use
Hmm.
the prototype chain. You just use the class inheritance syntax. So let's say tomorrow people find some bug because of which the class syntax, you think the class syntax works like class syntax, but because under the hood it works with prototype inheritance, you assume it's class syntax, and it causes a bug under the hood. Your The abstraction makes you think it's class based, but the way you implement the class based syntax causes a bug in the prototype chain based under the hood mechanism. So that is called a leaky abstraction, where your abstraction doesn't work as it's intended to work. It causes some problems inside. So your abstraction, the black box that is formed by the abstraction, starts to leak out. You get bugs out of it, and you have to then look into the
Oh,
abstraction.
You can't
So
even look
you
into
oh,
it
I thought
because
leaky.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, the problem would be
Why?
that you can't even look into the black box because that whole thing has been there's a facade in front of you that you can't look behind really. Right.
Yeah, it's integrated into the language. This is not even Babel.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
It
not even
doesn't
Babel.
transpile down
Right.
to vanilla JavaScript.
But you could use Babel to transpile your code, and you could see how it translates to vanilla JavaScript to figure out how the abstraction might work
But
or
it
not work.
doesn't necessarily, right? It doesn't necessarily translate to native JavaScript if it's a built-in
Yeah,
language feature, right?
That's completely dependent on the arguments you pass when transpiling it. So you can ask for these ES6 features to be transpiled to ES5, and then you would get how class works under it. Have you guys seen that? It's pretty interesting. It completely gets rid of the Java-ish inheritance function.
yeah,
But
It's
what I
essentially just your normal JavaScript that you used to write before. But yeah, Binoy.
no, what I was asking was that yes, if you give those arguments to Babel and tell it to transpile to ES5, it will transpile your source code to ES5 compatible source code. But that
Yeah,
will just be for backwards compatibility. Right? It's not guaranteed that the browser will interpret ES6 code natively the same way it would if it had to transpile it to ES5 and interpret that ES5 code, right? Am I correct in saying that?
well, I don't know.
yeah, you are. You're
Hmm.
saying that the browser might transpile ES6 in a different way
Exactly.
than Babel.
Yes.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
then
sure,
again,
sure, sure.
but then
But then
again,
why would?
every browser compiles their code differently, because Chrome uses
Yes.
V8, and Firefox has Spider Monkey,
Monkey.
and Chakra used by
Chakra.
Internet Edge. Yeah. So
Yeah,
it depends on the compiler. Yeah.
but it's also standardized. So it's not like if the ES6 standard says that a class is supposed to behave that way, it's not like the transpilers can change the behavior. They can definitely
Yeah.
have a different representation.
But sometimes the specification is very vague, so browsers implement it in their own way, just like SQL.
True, that's true.
Yeah.
And probably the bugs that Darshan's
That's
talking
true.
about would be under the hood. So, I mean, they could
Yeah.
be.
I mean, I'm just speculating. There haven't been any
Yeah,
bugs.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no,
yeah.
no. You're
It would be
free
way
of
above.
any.
Yeah, it would be way above a pay grade to try and debug that anyway.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone's trying to sue us at this point if they hear you on this podcast. So don't worry about it.
Or we could transpile to WASM. We
Right,
could
right,
transpile the code to WASM and compare it.
right.
Why not? Why not?
Have you guys worked with
Why not?
WASM?
Not
I have
really.
not. I have not yet.
Yeah,
I haven't
it's
found a
very
use yet. I think, as far as I understand, it's mainly for like high performance applications, right? Games or
yeah.
heavy
Yes. Yes.
visuals. Hmm.
Yes.
C++.
And as someone who works on admin interfaces, there's not
Yeah,
much performance improvement I want to do to forms.
right.
The bottleneck is somewhere else.
Yeah,
Unless when people, while the reports are loading, you want to have some games or something that people can play.
Like
user.
the dinosaur game.
Yeah. And that's been a legitimate proposal. And like the three of us work at the same company, and we've had issues with load times. And so one thing that's been suggested is just put a game in there.
True.
Just put
And I'm for
art
it. I
mode.
think everyone should do this.
Yes. Everyone should implement games as loaders, except us. I mean, I don't want to do it. I'd be happy to play the game though.
I think Chrome should open source the dinosaur game as just an API that you can hook into from
Oh,
any
is it? Ah,
application.
yeah. I wish, man. I wish that would be fucking awesome.
Just render it like a component, an HTML tag or
Yeah.
something.
Never again would we have a conversation with the
Yeah.
designer about what a loader is supposed to look like.
Exactly.
We could just
Directly
we could
import
just
the web
do this
component.
for yeah. We could just do this for all our interfaces. It
That
would
would be
it
great.
would be awesome. Yeah.
You know those video games where the loading screen had these mini games where you tap the button many
Yes.
number
Sure.
of times.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
was actually copyright patented by, I don't know actually. But Dragon Ball Z was made by Bandai Namco. Right?
Yes. Yes.
Those
Yes.
Dragon Ball Z games. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
I
Bandai
guess.
Namco patented that technology. So no
Oh.
other game could implement that fun little loading time pass mini games.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah,
It was
Interesting.
a
I always
technology. It was not just a interactive loading screen, is it?
yeah they
Like if I want to
patented
add
like a
Tetris,
so the
if I
whole technology of having a mini game within a loading page, that was patented itself, I think. And
The
oh
concept, the idea.
you would yeah the idea. I mean, you would wonder like this is such a great idea. Why don't other slow games do this? Because it's
right,
a fun
because they can't.
fun distraction. Yeah, it's because they can't. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not because they won't.
Right.
damn. Imagine having to pay royalties for a fucking loading screen.
Yeah,
Not worth it. Not worth it.
nope.
Right.
I think the patent expired recently. I have to check. But
Oh,
whatever,
okay.
this is a JavaScript podcast episode. We'll talk about this some other episode.
Right.
Possibly.
Yes.
Corporation and patents deserves its own episode.
Right. I always wondered though. You talked about prototypical inheritance, and I always wondered why this model. Why would JavaScript kind of adopt this model? And I did try searching for it, but I didn't find any conclusive answers except what I speculate, which is that you might want to load uh, web components from multiple origins and kind of mush them together into a cohesive piece of code. And doing that with a very strict class hierarchy or something like that might be problematic, maybe.
Perhaps I have no idea.
No
I,
idea.
I don't even I don't even know anything about Scheme to sort of draw a parallel or speculate. So your guess is as good as mine.
The only language that does this prototype inheritance sort of thing is Lua that I know of. I don't know any other language that has this prototype sort of inheritance
Right.
rather
Right.
than a class
That
based.
doesn't predate JavaScript though, does it?
Lua was invented in Brazil when there was a software embargo in the 80s or 90s. Let me check.
Wow. There's so many rich stories behind these pieces of software that I think we should visit them at some point in some episode.
Yeah, and there are so
Darshan's
many we
full of
probably
these
don't even know.
amazing bits of trivia.
1993,
Yeah,
Lua. So from
93, man. It's before we
1977
were
I
born.
to
think a couple of years
yeah
apart then. I think JavaScript was 95.
yeah 95.
Right.
Even Java was 95, right? Or 94.
Java might be 94.
Okay. I mean, all these programming languages have rich history because they're inspired by some other language, and the programming language that survived only because they had a niche that they could grab, and the creators of that language understood at that time. That's why it's such a memorable story that these languages have. Like Lua was made because Brazil had a strong trade barriers for software and hardware also apparently hardware also damn. So they made it out of a necessity, and that makes a great story. Similarly, let's say for Unix, a C was created for Unix, right? They had a
Yeah.
need and they made it for Unix. which was inspired from B, another language called B, I think.
Right.
Then you have a mind map as to why this language is used, because you understand the history. So you know, okay, this language is better for this sort of application.
For
But
sure. For
JavaScript
sure.
totally breaks this intuition, because JavaScript was made for the web, but now it's being used for backend servers also.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. To the wrath of many users.
yeah.
Yeah. And why do you think that is though? Why do you
People are
think
really
Node
against.
Mhm.
people are really against Node?
I Maybe it's the lack of a static type system for the backend. I'm not sure. People just like to attack everything in general. So yeah, I'm sure there is. Also, the stuff like regex and the character encoding support and all for JavaScript wasn't that great. It's definitely improving now. But earlier, language like Java would probably be much better for backend needs than JavaScript.
JavaScript,
Right.
yeah.
Even architecturally,
Especially the
you would think that
Yeah,
having I don't know, event-driven models generally I've seen being implemented mainly for GUI-based applications. JavaScript, your Swing and all, I think also did the same. And so
yeah,
it kind of seemed out of place when I first got into it. Why you would have that kind of model on the server side? You know, as opposed to you have your existing architectures, your web servers and application servers like Tomcat and all of these that kind of have spawn multiple threads on each request. Whereas in Node you have a single main thread that is kind of managing and balancing load.
I think
fair, fair. But I think
Node.js.
now even a lot of I think even Tomcat and all is moved to NIO, right? So it's no longer the case where they spawn multiple threads, I guess.
I think
Must
they do
be
still.
non-block.
Do they not?
Oh, okay. I'm not sure. It's been a while since I've read about Tomcat.
One of the
But
reasons why Node,
even there are even new Java frameworks. There are even new PHP frameworks that sort of work on the async event-based framework sort
Twister,
of paradigm.
Okay.
Twister
Yeah,
async
Java
paradigm.
has something like Vert, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and PHP has React PHP.
Even
Ah,
Yeah,
Twister
Vert,
has async mode, right?
Vert.x. Sorry.
Even Twister has async, right?
I couldn't hear you. What is async?
Twister,
Oh, I'm not. I'm
the
not sure.
the one made by Amazon.
Oh, I have no clue. I haven't heard of this.
Oh, okay.
What is Twister by Amazon?
It's a HTTP client library, a replacement for curl. So you can make async requests with it, I think. Is it called Twister?
I don't think it is. I can't
Uh,
find any Google results for it.
okay. I think I'm remembering the name wrong then. Ignore.
This
Yeah.
podcast has amazing research, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
so I think
Yes.
one bit to clarify on
Unclickable.
Rohan. So Tomcat for low-level I/O operations, your socket operations, etc., they do use NIO. So that's a pool of dedicated threads. But the actual application that you
Okay,
run will dispatch to a new thread on every request.
makes sense. Makes sense.
And I think also a lot of applications these days are kind of network heavy or IO heavy. So probably that event-driven model makes sense there, where you're spending a lot of time just waiting on IO events, file system events, or network events and things like that. And your
Yeah,
hardware is just better utilized,
sure.
leveraging that event-driven.
This is the case in API servers, dude. Because API servers mostly make requests to other servers
Right.
and collate data and have minimal processing, right?
Mhm.
So they most of the time is spent on waiting for network resources or file resources.
Right.
So this async or event loop based like an infra works for better for API servers
API
rather
servers.
than data processing servers, which
Sure.
do heavy
Right.
load bearing.
Mhm.
Another reason why Node and JS in general might have faced criticisms earlier is because of the syntax doesn't really support the whole event-driven thing. Callback hell is what I'm referring to, where you
Oh,
would
Yes.
right.
basically have just an array of nested callbacks. So a function passed to a function, passed to a function, passed to a function, many levels of indentation in the code. But
Right.
promises and
Promises.
async await have solved that greatly. Again, that's basically just syntactic sugar. Await, not promises. But promises, I think, was pretty big step towards solving the
Yeah.
whole callback hell issue. And async
Right.
await has made promise code also look pretty synchronous, although obviously it doesn't function that way.
It doesn't. Right.
So another reason that JavaScript has gained a lot of infamy, I guess, is because of ads. Just can't live
Yes.
with them, can't live without them. Actually, you can live
It's
without
not
them,
just
but then we wouldn't
it's
get
not
paid.
just JavaScript. It started with the image tag because people wanted to share
Yes.
cat images and all that, right? So then came cookies. Then came cookies with which browser could manipulate client-side data to send to the server. Then
Right.
came JavaScript, which could easily manipulate cookies, and with images, you could so many websites could talk to a single website that provides a cat image. So let's say your web page, my web page, and Rohan's web page all have the same cat image. So people visiting the three of our websites will call the cat images hosting domain name, right? Cat images hosting domain name would know uh, what all sites we've traveled because it knows this Rohan, Darshal, and Binoy site has requested my resource. So it'll know where you guys have traveled. And and now imagine instead of a cat image, Google is the one who's providing you this cat image. And there's no cat image. There's just one by one pixel that you can't even see on the web page.
Right.
That's how the pixel was born, right? You
Yes.
just use a image,
Pretty
very
much.
small image, and the image request is sent to Google or any other tracking website, and that tracking website keeps track of all your uh, cookie data because cookies are stored by browser and browser requests uh, uh, external data through image tags. But later on, you
Fair.
don't even need the pixel image tags, right? Because you had JavaScript. JavaScript can easily manipulate cookies and make external calls. That's why
Right.
HTTPS has played a huge role in privacy nowadays.
Right. And I think
No.
JavaScript specifically also enables you to serve ads specifically programmatically. So you have Google Ads and all that loading full-fledged libraries into your web page, and they do everything for you. Where you just hook into an API, and Google's library is going to look through your web pages, check what slots are there on which they can show ads, look at the context of the web page, what content is there around the ad, and then show the ad, and kind of do all of a huge amount of behind the scenes magic, setting cookies and just pushing a whole lot of data server side that they can then use to profile visitors and so many things that you wouldn't normally be able to do without a powerful program like way to uh, programmatically manipulate the website and via JavaScript.
The JavaScript has empowered these companies to collect our data.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well, I mean, now there are so many other things with which we are being tracked. Ads are the least of our worries. We
yeah.
basically have a pocket rectangle that tracks our every move.
Yeah, but all of that in the service of
So
ads
Of
at the
cell
end of the
phones.
day. Right now, all of that is in the service of
yes,
ads.
yes, yes, it is.
Yeah,
It always has been. Yeah.
always
But
has been.
Brendan Ike, the guy who created JavaScript in 10 days, I feel like that's how you should just keep introducing
Yeah,
it.
that
Brendan
should
Ike,
be
the
on
guy
his
who created
resume. The
JavaScript
first
in
line
10 days.
on his resume should be that.
Yeah, but I mean, who's gonna ask him for a resume?
Yeah, good
he
point.
he has come up with a browser called Brave, I think.
Right,
He had a whole talk about why was it a talk or blog post something where
right.
he is essentially trying to remove ads from our browsing experience. There was
Yeah,
also something to do with some currency or something, a Brave
yes,
sort
Yeah.
of
yes, yes.
token system. I'm
Yeah.
not entirely. I don't
So,
remember it.
so
It's
what
been a
they're
while
doing
since I
Instead
is
saw it.
of
what they're doing is they're basically coming up with a token, a crypto, kind of like a blockchain powered token where Brave is going to be. So they're completely doing away with third party cookies, which are like the major source of this, malicious targeted advertising. So they're completely doing away with those. And it becomes such that when you're browsing inside of Brave, you ads are shown to you directly by the publisher through Brave. So the publishers will now kind of partner with Brave. They'll partner with you as a user of Brave, and whatever ads are shown to you, you and the publisher are you and Brave are compensated for it, via that token. So it's like there's no middleman, there's no Google in between or someone who's trying to uh, collect your data or anything. It's just
Right.
it's just plain.
But
Brave
these
just
aren't
showing you.
targeted ads, right? Because I'm guessing Dave would not collect any information, or
They are not.
or is it?
I
They are
don't know
not.
if
But
they
Brave
will.
does allow you to. No, so Brave does allow you to. Although they like in their defense, they do allow you to fine tune what information you provide. But there is a limited amount of information that Brave, or context rather, that Brave will provide to the supplier of the ad. But you can definitely, as far as I've seen, as far as I've researched, you can definitely tune what amount of information you're willing to disclose, or if any at all. And
But
and
do
also
you disclose this information to Brave or the publisher directly?
just
Does
the browser,
Brave share the information, or just the browser?
just the
That
browser.
sounds good.
So even the ad algorithm. Yes, go ahead.
I thought the token was for you to tip the website that
It
you
is.
like to visit. So I don't know how ads play.
No,
a
it's
role
not.
in
It's for ads actually. So maybe. So I'm not sure if they have a direct to publisher model. They might, but they also have an ad model where you are compensated for like providing your data and seeing the ad as well. So that token is awarded in some proportion to you and the publisher who is showing the ad on the page.
And where are these ads stored? Who's the ad? Where's the ad
Brave.
exchange?
So the entire ad auction logic
Okay.
and showing what ads to show to whom is all managed on browser by Brave, which
Okay.
again has led to concerns and criticisms that say
Okay.
that basically say you're just the new Google, or you're just the
Yeah,
new
they're
Chrome.
just testing Brave at this point.
Right. You're just trusting Brave at this point. So again, they do have ways to explain that away, but it remains to be seen how successful this becomes.
Indeed.
They have a notification on their more like an alert on their website saying Brave ads do not replace current web page ads.
Right.
I think they're trying to just be a bit defensive. Like, we're not doing that.
How
But
ironic is it
here
that,
it says, sorry.
how ironic is it that Chrome has an ad blocking feature inside it? Chrome will
It
release an
does?
ad
Yes.
blocking, or it does
Oh, okay.
have an ad blocking feature.
Okay. I didn't think it does. I thought it was still a thing in Chromium. I didn't know it was going to be merged into Chrome.
Oh, okay. Because I use Chromium and I still get ads. Damn it.
Oh, okay. Opera it is. So it says here you can earn something called basic attention tokens for every ad you
ads.
and when you Brave ads, you receive 70% of the ad revenue.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Nice.
That's a pretty sizable chunk. I mean, that is most of
it
the.
is.
Interesting.
It sure is, man. When has Google ever paid us?
What has Google ever done?
Google, if you're listening.
It has only given us free mail, free videos, free storage. But what has it done for us lately?
Yeah, but it's not really free. I think we've given a lot that we don't know about.
True. We are the product.
Yeah, we are the product.
Yeah, we've all seen what is that thing? Social Dilemma.
The Social Dilemma.
All
yes.
seen that.
Yes, we have.
Oh, I haven't seen the documentary on Netflix.
You should.
Oh, you should.
It's a little scary. It's a little over dramatized, but it makes sense nonetheless. I mean, all of it is
Yeah.
based on
It has
truth.
Black Mirror vibes.
We've just Black Mirrorized it.
It's
Yeah.
nothing that we don't know, to be fair.
Yeah.
We know about. Everyone knows about this. It's very surprising if people don't. But yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if people don't know about this because not many people are tech savvy, right?
Oh, I
So-
specifically meant
Us.
We know
us,
about
okay.
this.
We- okay.
I don't expect
thought
my
we as in the
random
public.
uncle to no. I don't expect my random uncle to know the evils of Facebook.
Man,
Yeah.
Facebook has become. I mean, young people have abandoned Facebook. I feel.
Yeah,
I've
there's
seen
only
a lot of
boomers
my
on it.
older relatives. Yeah, boomer book it's called nowadays.
Yeah.
How did this change happen, dude? It's so fascinating how
Popularity.
things evolve.
You got
Popularity. It used to be an exclusive thing, and then it used to be exclusively for Harvard or something, right? When it started,
yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
and then slowly moved to other colleges. Then it moved to the general audience.
Public.
Then it moved to what was when it came here, it was more like a replacement for Awkward, right? A lot of people were on Awkward,
It was, yeah.
Yes.
and then it slowly grew, and then parents came on it, and that's just how it starts, I guess.
Yeah.
In a couple of
And then
years, this
people
might be happening to
abandon
Instagram and all. So nothing
this-
is free from boomers.
Yeah.
This makes you realize why the 10 billion price tag on Instagram was worth it. You realize it now. You know that Facebook is boomerland.
Yeah.
Facebook was relevant.
Right.
I think we've gone on for a long time. I think we should. Shall we stop here?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining
Stuff.
for this first episode. We hope you enjoyed it and see you on the next one. Bye bye.